If you've ever wondered how medieval towns fed themselves on scraps of land behind walls, along rivers, and in courtyards barely larger than modern backyards, this episode is for you. Today we're uncovering medieval guild planting, a forgotten agricultural system that quietly supercharged micro-farms centuries before industrial farming existed. Before we go any further, subscribe to the channel and stay with us, because this isn't romantic folklore. It's a disciplined, field-tested system that allowed small plots to outperform larger fields through coordination, specialization, and biological cooperation. Medieval guild planting did not mean farmers working alone. It meant organized cooperation between trades, land, and crops. Guilds were not only associations of craftsmen like bakers or tanners. Many towns had agricultural guild structures that controlled how land was planted, rotated, fertilized, and shared. These systems evolved under pressure. Space was limited, populations were dense, and failure meant hunger. As a result, medieval growers learned how to stack productivity in ways that modern micro-farms are only beginning to rediscover. The foundation of guild planting was functional grouping rather than single crop thinking. Fields and gardens were planted in living systems, where each plant served a role beyond harvest. Legumes were paired with heavy feeders, shallow-rooted plants with deep ones, aromatic herbs with vulnerable greens. This wasn't done randomly. It was codified knowledge enforced by guild rules and passed down through apprenticeships. The goal was stability, not maximum yield in a single season. For a modern micro-farm, this means abandoning the idea of isolated beds and instead designing plant communities that support each other continuously. One core element of medieval guild planting was the master crop and its companions. A dominant crop, such as cabbage, wheat or onions, anchored the system. Around it were planted supporters that fixed nitrogen, suppressed weeds, attracted beneficial insects, or improved soil structure. For example, medieval cabbage plots often included beans for nitrogen, dill or coriander for pest control, and shallow greens to shade soil. To apply this today, choose one primary crop per bed and surround it intentionally. Let every plant earn its place by contributing something beyond harvest. Another overlooked principle was vertical cooperation. You see, medieval growers used height quite aggressively. Tall plants provided wind protection and light filtering, while vines climbed supports or even companion crops. Low growers, in turn, filled the gaps. This clever arrangement allowed more food per square metre without exhausting the soil. In modern terms, a micro-farm bed might combine climbing beans on trellises, leafy greens below, and root crops beneath that. Medieval guilds understood that any unused space was simply wasted productivity. Guild planting also relied heavily on shared fertility systems. Waste from one trade fed another. Brewers, for instance, supplied spent grain, and blacksmith ash corrected soil acidity. Livestock guilds provided manure aged according to strict rules. Nothing was applied fresh or blindly. Inputs were processed, tested by experience, and shared according to need. This closed-loop system kept the soil fertile without collapse. Today, micro-farmers can replicate this by integrating composting, ash use, and organic waste cycling instead of relying on purchased inputs. Timing was enforced collectively. Guild calendars dictated when planting occurred, when fields rested, and when cover crops were sown. This prevented soil exhaustion and pest build-up. It also synchronized labor and resource use. For a modern grower, this translates into disciplined rotation and rest periods. Even on a small plot, rotating plant families and scheduling rest through cover crops restores soil resilience far faster than continuous planting. One of the most powerful aspects of medieval guild planting was, well, redundancy. No guild relied on a single crop. If wheat failed, legumes or roots carried the season. If greens succumbed to pests, stored onions and grains filled the gap. This diversity made microfarms resilient. Applying this today means growing fewer varieties in larger numbers, but making sure those varieties serve different roles and seasons. Diversity was not chaos. It was insurance. Medieval guild planting also trained growers to observe rather than react. Decisions were based on plant behavior, soil smell, moisture retention, and, well, pest presence. Adjustments were gradual. Overcorrection was avoided. This slow feedback loop is why guild systems endured for centuries. Modern growers often change too much too fast. Learning from guild planting means changing one variable at a time and allowing the system to respond. Practical application begins with mapping your space as a system rather than a grid. Identify dominant crops, assign companions, plan vertical layers, integrate fertility sources, rotate deliberately. Even a balcony or backyard can function as a guild if each element supports the whole. The scale doesn't matter. The logic does. What makes medieval guild planting so relevant today is that it was designed for constraint. Limited land, limited tools, limited margin for error. That is exactly the reality of modern micro-farms. Industrial agriculture optimized for abundance of space and energy. Guild planting optimized for resilience and efficiency. If this guide changed how you think about small-scale farming and historical food systems, subscribe to the channel and share this episode with someone who believes bigger fields are the only path to productivity. These forgotten systems fed cities for centuries, and learning them may be the key to making micro-farms truly sustainable again.